It's Roger Stone, sitting in for Alex Jones. The president is back from a triumphant international tour, a bit overscheduled in my opinion, but still highly successful. And of course, as I predicted back during the election, Melania Trump is the toast of Europe, just as Jacqueline Kennedy was. Poised, beautiful, cultured, a great, great representative for the United States of America and for President Donald Trump. He should be very proud. Intrigue in Washington. All Washington and every political reporter in town waiting to hear about the impending White House shakeup and whether Donald Trump will move aggressively to save himself. Yes, this is step one of a new strategy that would be offensive, meaning the president will go on the offense against his critics, whether they be in the media, whether they be in the Democratic Party, or, gee, is that the same thing? In any event, everybody is waiting for step one. The White House communications consultant, Mike Dubke, out. Never really understood why he was there to begin with. Not a Trump Republican, not a Trump supporter. Never really gelled with the Trump White House staff. Ominous signs that Corey Lewandowski and Dave Bossy, who I refer to as Dumb and Dumber, will be coming in some kind of new plumbers unit to impose discipline on the Trump White House, to bolster security, to plug the leaks. Are these two latter-day plumbers? If the President of the United States wants to get to the bottom of who's leaking in his administration, well, then I recommend that he turn this over to the new FBI director, whoever that person may be. Not some extra legal outside effort to find the leakers. This is reminiscent of E. Howard Hunt and Gordon Liddy, and of course the famous Watergate scandal was the result. Now we have an incredible tweet yesterday in which Ana Navarro says that she's proud of the president of France, the new president. She has president envy. I'm sorry, but Mr. Macron is presiding over a system in which the French people are under assault from a swarms of young Arab men, young Islamic men, raping, pillaging, destroying public property. We have a special report on the truth about refugees. Let's take a look.
This is the shocking truth behind the Syrian refugee crisis that has been hidden from the public. Those boatloads of Africans you see on their way to Europe, yeah, well, for one, they're not coming from Syria, the clue being that they're African, and two, they're not refugees. They've not been rescued off the coast of Italy. Governments and aid agencies want you to believe that these people have struggled in flimsy fishing boats and dinghies to make it all the way across the Mediterranean. That's total BS. This is the insane reality of what's actually happening. The migrants pay people smugglers €1,500 each. They're not destitute refugees. The people smugglers then transport the migrants to a position just 12 miles off the coast of Libya. Just 12 miles. They then send out a distress call and the migrants are picked up by EU and NGO vessels. It's literally a taxi service straight to Europe. As The Spectator's Nicholas Farrell exposes, there's reason to suspect that the people smugglers are actually in direct contact with aid agencies, which is why they're so often first on the scene to rescue migrant boats. And this is a criminal offence. The law states that the refugees should be taken to the nearest safe port, which would be Tunisia. But these NGOs are taking them straight to Italy. As you can see in this marinetraffic.com illustration, the NGO boats are leaving Italy, travelling to right off the coast of Libya, just off the coast, then returning to Italy with their human cargo. It's literally a taxi service. And isn't it ironic that the only time these boats are diverted from Sicily is when G7 elitists are in town. It's a security threat for them to be faced with the very crisis they created. An investigation in Italy found that most of the NGO ships are German. Even the EU border agency Frontex accused aid agencies of helping, quote, criminals achieve their objectives. The people smugglers contact the aid agencies directly, knowing they won't be arrested. Quote, since June 2016, many boats have been rescued near the Libyan coast by aid agency vessels without any prior distress call, suggesting the rendezvous has been pre-arranged. Italian prosecutor Carmelo Zuccaro says he has evidence of phone calls between criminal people smugglers and NGOs like Save the Children, Proactiva Open Arms, and SOS Mediterranean. George Soros open society-backed foundations like Avaz.org, Medicine Sans Frontiers, and MoveOn.org are also allegedly involved. Soros invested $500 million to, quote, help refugees, some of which is going straight to these NGOs. ISIS is also offering migrants free passage through the Mediterranean if they join the terror group. So in some cases, they're actually footing the bill for these migrants to pay the people smugglers, who in turn are in communication with the NGOs. This is a complete scandal and a huge security threat, yet virtually nobody knows that this is the primary method by which refugees are pouring into Europe. Just 2.65% of migrants arriving in Italy are awarded asylum status. They're not refugees. Half of them disappear on arrival and don't even claim asylum. Over 200,000 migrants are arriving in Italy alone via this method every single year. And that's only going to increase. If you think there'll come a point where the number of migrants pouring into Europe slows to a trickle, then think again. If we continue these disastrous policies, it's only going to get worse. Much worse. Africa's population is exploding. Look at the countries surrounding Libya. Niger's population is set to almost quadruple in the next 3 decades, from 20 million to 72 million. Chad's population is set to leap from 14 million to 35 million. Sudan is heading towards 80 million. Egypt, 152 million. Ethiopia, 189 million. Nigeria, 400 million. And I haven't even included those arriving from the Middle East. The character of a place is determined by the people who live there. You can't flood European cities with tens of millions of people from the Middle East and Africa and expect it to remain the same. Eventually, it's going to start to feel less like Europe and more like the Middle East and Africa. Look at what's happening in southern Italy, where these migrants are arriving. Once a holiday paradise, Sicily is now the scene of a turf war between the Italian mafia and African crime gangs. Listen to what the mayor of Palermo said. Quote, Palermo is no longer an Italian town. It's no longer European. You can walk in the city and feel like you're in Istanbul or Beirut. Palermo is a Middle Eastern town in Europe. In other countries, the evidence is pretty clear that this grand experiment in cultural enrichment isn't working. Migrants are responsible for 90% of shootings in Sweden. A report by Germany's Interior Ministry found that an extra 402,741 crimes were committed by migrants, with non-Germans accounting for 27.6% of total offences. 500,000 migrants in Germany are on welfare benefits. Gang rapes of girls and women are becoming commonplace. Women in Paris are now protesting against constant abuse and harassment by gangs of migrant men.
To demonstrate the kind of reaction they get from men, they visit a local cafe with a hidden camera. Before they even get inside, their presence seems to disturb the other clients. There are only men in here, and they're not very welcoming.
Le mieux, c'est d'attendre dehors.
Pourquoi?
Ici, avec des hommes.
Bah, c'est pas grave, on vit dans un monde où il y a des hommes et des femmes. Ça vous dérange, vous?
Moi, c'est pour vous.
Non, pour moi, là, je suis...
The bar owner doesn't want to talk. The other customers, meanwhile, are uncomfortable.
Mais je m'en fous, on va se faire discrète, petite dans un coin.
Il y a que des mecs dans ce café.
Et comment c'est normal qu'il n'y a que des mecs? Imagine que tu veux prendre un café avec une cousine, une amie, ta femme, non?
Normal. Ma cousine, elle reste chez elle.
Ta cousine, elle reste chez elle. Ah bon?
Elle fait ce qu'elle veut, mais pas avec moi. Ben voilà, dans ce café, il n'y a pas de mixité.
Et est-ce que c'est normal?
La Sevran, on n'est pas à Paris.
Même à Sevran, c'est la France.
T'es dans le 93.
Et alors, le 80... Et alors?
À Paris, c'est des mentalités différentes. C'est comme anglais.
For a woman, going into a bar here is breaking a taboo.
Murders by migrants are daily news. Even leftists who help migrants reach Italy admit that many of them support ISIS.
He said they were processing men, adults in their 30s, who all had phones with ISIS stuff on the phones. They were being separated. When they were being handed over to the authorities with the information explaining that these guys, had all this on their phones and what their ages were, and they were just being processed through. There was nothing, they weren't being separated out. They just all went through with everything else.
Germany and Italy are forcibly confiscating private property to house migrants. PostNord announced it would stop mail delivery to the migrant suburb of Rinkeby because it's too unsafe. And people who complain about any of this are being put on hate crime blacklists. Social media giants are censoring accurate reporting as hate speech. What's the solution to this crisis? Well, it isn't to pander to racism, xenophobia, or to resort to futile stunts and identitarian vigilantism. In fact, that only emboldens leftists and the institutions they control to pursue their policies with more vigour, prolonging their delusion that they have the moral high ground. You're also not going to convince reasonable-minded people by becoming right-wing social justice warriors. It just turns people off. Listen, the individual migrants aren't to blame for trying to escape to a better life. If I lived in a poverty-stricken African country, I'd try to do the same, and so would you. But again, that's economic migration. It's not refugees fleeing war-torn countries. It's fundamentally dishonest to call it a refugee crisis when it's not. 85% of migrants arriving in Italy are men. The vast majority of them are from countries that are not at war. But migrants didn't create this crisis. The political elite created it. Leftist NGOs created it. They created it because they fundamentally hate Western values and are quite prepared to destroy them to remain in power. Europe's loss of faith in its own achievements and culture, the continent's demographic collapse, this guilt-ridden self-immolation, this suicidal virtue signalling that led to Merkel to swing the borders wide open. It's all based on an existential crisis engineered by the leftist political elite, ensconced in ivory towers and luxury hotels, shuttled between banquets and private parties by their chauffeurs. They don't have to live amongst the societal crises that they create. They don't care about the impact millions of unassimilated migrants have on society or culture. They only care about power. They replaced what defined the West, rule of law, equality, with the empty platitudes of tolerance and diversity. And it's been catastrophic. The EU wants to force member states to accept more migrants. Macron is threatening sanctions on Poland for refusing to do that. The only solution is to turf out those political elites and prosecute the NGOs for their criminal activity. The solution is to provide incentives for these migrants to stay in their home countries. The solution is to push for a political settlement that unites Libya, something that's moving closer to fruition. A unification that empowers a single authority to plug the leak by arresting and jailing the people smugglers. This will also stop the flood of migrants from other African countries entering Libya in the first place. And if it's proven that members of NGOs have been coordinating with people smugglers, arrest and jail them too. Don't incentivize people smuggling by allowing NGO boats to be on standby to ferry these migrants into Europe at the drop of a hat. Italy could be about to prosecute these aid agencies, and we need to keep the pressure up to ensure that happens. There's an election in Italy next year. Polls show Beppe Grillo's five-star movement with a slender lead over the ruling centre-left party. The five-star movement has called out NGOs for providing a taxi service to migrants. If they take power, the racket is over and the aid agencies will face prosecution. The flood of migrants into Europe from Libya will cease. France chose virtual national suicide by voting for Macron, but Italy still has an opportunity to save itself and possibly the rest of the continent by electing Beppe Grillo. Look, free speech protests are going to do F all to stop these migrants pouring in every day. Railing against the symptoms, railing against Islam. And hey, I'm guilty as charged for doing that. But it doesn't count for anything. We need to stop these boats. We need criminal prosecutions and a permanent change of policy. The cultural identity of Europe is already being eviscerated. This isn't about race. It's about the survival of our fundamental values and our way of life. We need to stop the bleeding now, before it's too late.
An extraordinary, hard-hitting piece by Paul Joseph Watson. Now is as good a time as ever to point out the incredible specials going on here at the InfoWars store. This is a way for you to support the revolution and patriot media, free expression, the First Amendment, and a free press. The Memorial Day mega special has been extended, but not for very long. In all candor, this broadcast would be impossible without Brain Force. This is one of the best products I've ever used for mental clarity, for energy, to get yourself mentally organized and prepare to fight the hard tech left as they seek to censor us. And you can find all of the very best products now on a special discount. Silver Bullet Colloidal, 65% off. Super Male Virility, back in stock, 30% off. The aforementioned Brain Force at 47% off. Survival Shield. This stuff may have saved my life back at the time when I believed I was poisoned just prior to being called to testify before the House Non-Intelligence Committee. Secret 12, 43% off. Knockout, an additional 50% off. These are the very finest all-natural supplemental products you can buy, folks, and you are helping the revolution when you go to the site. So stand with us, go to the store. You got to have our back here in the fight for free expression. Welcome back, Patriots. I'm Roger Stone, sitting in for the great Alex Jones. Hillary Clinton back in the news, giving an address at Wellesley, where for some reason she tried to dress exactly like Monica Lewinsky, beret and everything. And a lot of bitterness coming out of Hillary. She talks about fake news, but then she goes on to say that Richard Nixon was impeached. Well, he wasn't impeached. He was not convicted. He resigned. But more importantly, Hillary would have us forget that she was fired as a young staffer from the House Impeachment Committee. She tried during the campaign to rewrite history, her supporters saying that Jerry Ziefman, the chief of staff and chief counsel to the House Impeachment Committee, an ardent Democrat, didn't have the authority to fire her. Well, he did, and he fired her for lying and leaking, two attributes that she would bring forward into her political career. The difference between Richard Nixon and her husband is obvious. Richard Nixon loved his country, and when he believed he was hurting the country, he stepped down as president of the United States. No such selfless act by Bill Clinton, her husband. We've got a terrific video here. Let's look at Hillary at Wellesley and see how delusional this lady really is.
We didn't trust government, authority figures, or really anyone over 30.
Does Monica know that she has her hat, by the way? That's one of the things I'd like to know.
Thanks to years of heavy casualties and dishonest official statements about Vietnam, and deep differences over civil rights and poverty here at home. We were asking urgent questions about whether women, people of color, religious minorities, immigrants would ever be treated with dignity and respect. And by the way, we were furious about the past presidential election of a man whose presidency would eventually end in disgrace with his impeachment for obstruction of justice.
Is this woman incapable of telling the truth? Bill Clinton's presidency should have ended for his selling secrets to the Chinese and the Russians in return for campaign contributions.
The person running the investigation into him at the Department of Justice.
There you have it, Hillary Clinton, highly delusional. Stay tuned here at InfoWars and the Alex Jones Show. We've got a great show coming up, including rock legend Rick Derringer. Dr. Jerome Corsi is going to break down the truth about Seth Rich for us. And later in the show, we talk about David Urban, the White House shakeup, and whether the president will move aggressively to save himself. It's all right here at InfoWars on the Alex Jones Show. We'll be right back. We are also going to talk about the fake news trend in America. The president has forthrightly come back and taken on the media in a way that has long since been necessary. We know who the enemy is. We know that we speak the truth, and you'll get the full lowdown here at InfoWars. I'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show here on InfoWars. Where else could you get Hank Williams Sr. but here in Austin, Texas? One of my favorites. The mainstream media seems now to be out of leakers. They've resorted to just fabricating things, making things up. How does one deal with an adversary that just willfully lies and puts it on page 1 of the newspaper? The newest canard from some of these nefarious unnamed sources who the media claims are talking in derogatory terms about the president, well, they really don't exist. We saw graphically in Europe how the elite, arrogant European leaders completely mishandled Donald Trump. If you really wanted him to sign on to the climate accords from Paris, perhaps you should have praised him. Instead, they snubbed him. They were arrogant. They were rude. And then, of course, a White House aide, Gary Cohn, made the mistake of telling the New York Post, well, the president came to Europe to get smart about climate change. Sorry, Mr. Cohn, the president already is smart. That's why the American people elected him. And what of a president that has the cojones to stand there in front of these delinquent European leaders and say, hey, boys, when it comes to NATO, it's time for you to pay up. This is the kind of president I want. Somebody with the courage to tell it like it is, right in their grill, as they say. These countries are supposed to be putting up 2% of their GDP to fund NATO. We fund 72% of the NATO overall budget. It's time to have a president who puts America first. CNN, of all people, produced a terrific video on the NATO situation. Let's have a look.
I cover national security and foreign policy.
I'm a retired Rear Admiral in the Navy, also served as Pentagon Press Secretary and State Department spokesman.
I cover anything from U.S. role in NATO to ISIS in the Middle East. When it comes to NATO, it's very complicated.
It's been a problem for decades. I would say 20, 30 years.
Many U.S. presidents have talked about NATO members needing to take on more of the burden.
President Trump wouldn't be the first president that has tried to do this. President Obama made the case, as did President Bush before him.
There was a breakthrough in 2014 at a summit in Wales, but there are other factors. In 2014, we saw the rise of ISIS, and we also saw Russia and Vladimir Putin moving into Ukraine and annexing Crimea. And those things really, really scared people in Europe. It was a huge incentive to spend more so that they can defend themselves.
It's a struggle because many European countries are having their own domestic economic woes that are limiting their ability to spend on defense.
President Trump has really made this a cornerstone of his campaign, certainly, and now of his foreign policy, and is even threatening to withdraw from the alliance if the U.S., if other countries don't pay more.
I think he has put the fear of God into some countries. With a lot of his rhetoric during the campaign, he was very equivocal about whether the U.S. needs NATO, and I think that unsettled people.
His bellicose nature has certainly reignited the flame, but that flame was already burning.
NATO members are willing to pay more, and they are coming up with plans to lay out an outline for how they're going to pay more. The U.S. wants them to commit to a 10-year plan. A lot of countries aren't ready to do that.
It's going to be a constant balancing act for them.
The president's bellicose attitude. Pay up, you freeloaders. Time to cough up, you European deadbeats. Yes, Donald Trump speaks the truth, keeping faith with the people he pledged to clean up the NATO problem in the last election. I'm Roger Stone, and you're at the right place at InfoWars. Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone from the Stone Cold Truth, sitting in for the Patriot freedom fighter, Alex Jones. And joining us shortly is one of the finest investigative reporters working today in the United States, Dr. Jerome Corsi, Skyping in from his palatial New Jersey estate. But before we go to Dr. Corsi, I want to highlight an incredible video from a British member of Parliament, Nigel Evans. Mr. Evans has said what many Americans will not say in an extraordinarily hard-hitting video. Let's take a look at what this distinguished British politician has to say.
Those who find it difficult to understand that the American people voted for Donald Trump get over it because he's president of the United States. And what I would say for all of us here, and this actually includes myself, is that we have to ask ourselves, why is it that people felt so left behind that they made the democratic decisions that they've had, which we think we can't understand, some of us. How can you possibly vote for Brexit? How can you possibly vote for Donald Trump? And the fact is that the people have. These were the forgotten people. And just like we had the forgotten people in the United Kingdom, there are the forgotten people in the United States of America. We may not like some of the things that he says, and I certainly don't like some of the things that he said in the past. But I do respect the fact that he stood on a platform which he is now delivering. He's going to go down in history as being roundly condemned for being the only politician to deliver on his promises.
And there you have it, speaking the truth in Europe, a member of the British Parliament. And now joining us, Dr. Jerome Corsi. Now, Dr. Corsi has written a blockbuster series, which I am just now getting into, but you can find at the InfoWars website, on the entire question of Seth Rich and why he was murdered. See, the great thing about Dr. Corsi is he uses the investigative techniques that the intelligence agencies use. He starts with the product and then works back to examine the motives. He has really zeroed in on what was stolen, when it was stolen, when it was published, and uses a process of elimination to prove that only Seth Rich could have been responsible for the breach at the DNC, which revealed that Deborah Wasserman Schultz and Hillary Clinton's campaign colluded to steal the nomination from Bernie Sanders, and that the two hackers, Guccifer 1 and 2, do play central roles. Dr. Corsi, welcome to InfoWars.
Thanks, Roger. It's great to be with you, and I appreciate the introduction. The key to what these three articles do is really very analytical. It takes apart, in a way you'll never see the mainstream media do, the details of how the Democrats operated their emails and their computer systems, including voting systems, and that it details each hack or leak and traces in an counterintelligence way how it had to happen. So these are articles which are going to be very, very detailed, and I think once you've read them, you're going to get the background of understanding how the Seth Rich murder, why it occurred, and what was involved in Seth Rich's decision to steal the emails that he stole and give them to WikiLeaks.
Dr. Corsi, what do you make of what appears to be a mainstream media effort directed by the Democrats to cut off all discussion of this matter, as if it's verboten? You can't talk about whether Seth Rich was murdered. You can't talk about who may have done it. You're supposed to respect the privacy of the family. Now, I think while the privacy of the family is important, the truth is more important.
Well, the truth is the only really critical thing in the pursuit of the politics of the story. I mean, the family, we all respect the family, and the family, unfortunately, is going to have to deal with the public nature of this murder and the solving of the murder. But when you get down to the Democratic operatives, I think there's two reasons, Roger, that Democrats are just terribly afraid of the Seth Rich story. One, it's going to expose that the core corruption was the Democrats themselves. And I'm not convinced that the Russians hacked anybody as a result of doing this examination. What I am convinced of is that the Democrats ran an extremely lax security system with all of their networks, including their voting data, and it was relatively easy to hack them. Secondly, once the entire this narrative of the Russian collusion collapses, what you're going to find at the core of it is, again, more crimes committed by Hillary Clinton, more crimes committed by the Democratic Party, lies, and essentially a cover-up story that was concocted to explain why Hillary lost. In other words, the Russians stole it from them, when the truth is that the Russians wanted Hillary to win. The Russians were paying Hillary, they were paying Podesta, they had the Obama administration in their back pocket. Obama had done nothing when Russia went into Ukraine. It did nothing in Crimea. The Russians had the Obama administration in their back pocket, and Russia could have easily blackmailed Hillary and Podesta had Hillary been in the White House. That's what the Democrats are afraid the American people are going to find out, is that the Russians really, as they say, didn't do anything, and Julian Assange, as he's largely hinted, had relied upon Seth Rich, an internal member of the Democratic National Committee, who became so disillusioned with how Hillary stole the election from Bernie Sanders that he decided he would retaliate by stealing DNC emails and Podesta emails, and WikiLeaks strategically published them, basically destroying Hillary's campaign. But this was not Donald Trump. At the same time, and this is going to be another series of articles I'm going to write, the Obama people were systematically wiretapping Donald Trump's campaign and setting up this whole Russian meme in order to try to undermine the administration should Donald Trump win. At the heart of this story is Democratic corruption, which is astounding and is many scales greater than Watergate or the corruption of Richard Nixon.
You know, my friend Sam Nunberg, an early advisor to Donald Trump, really summed this up better than anyone else. No crime, no collusion, no cover-up. It's time for the president, in my view, to get on offense. Now, Dr. Corsi, you are an old Washington hand. You know your way around the inner beltway sanctums. What do you make of this overdrive effort by the NSA to find the Russian collusion. They have doubled down rather than backing off. What do you make of that?
Well, again, I think the NSA is also afraid that they're going to find that this whole FISA process was compromised. In other words, that the Obama administration was regularly doing electronic surveillance on Americans, and especially any Americans that were politically enemies of the Clintons or the Obamas or the Democrat Party as a whole. And the unmasking, in other words, not only getting surveillance on U.S. citizens, which is permitted under law in very narrow circumstances, done broadly on political enemies, on the Trump campaign and a whole, and then the names unmasked, which means that within the White House, a decision was made to reveal the names of the people who had been illegally under electronic surveillance from the NSA, and then to leak that information to the press in order to do detriment to the Trump campaign. And I'm going to do the same kind of detailed forensic, counterintelligence analysis and show how the stories that were appearing in the New York Times and other places throughout the campaign were sourced through leaks from the White House that used unmasked intelligence information that made it clear the Obama administration was conducting massive surveillance on Trump's campaign. In other words, whatever the Democrats have charged Trump with doing, colluding with the Russians, it was the Democrats who were colluding with the Russians. Wiretapping and breaking into the democratic systems on electronic surveillance. The Russians were not doing that. It was the Democrats who were surveilling illegally the Trump campaign. Who was in bed with Russia was Hillary and Podesta, making money, which we see through these the leaked emails. At the bottom line, the Russians did not make Podesta or Debbie Wasserman Schultz write the horrendous anti-Sanders and manipulative emails that they wrote. It was their own words, which the Democrats can't stand, that the American people realize the Democrats are trying to change the subject. That's all this is about. And when the American people realize the extent of this scandal, I doubt that the Democratic Party, as we now know it, is going to survive. Of course, the Democratic Party is moving so far to the left so rapidly, it's hard to tell what it is anyway.
All right. We'll be back in just a few minutes with more of the hard-hitting reports of Dr. Jerome Corsi here at InfoWars. But now would be a great time for you to go to the InfoWars store and support the fight for freedom. I'm Roger Stone, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to InfoWars. I'm Roger Stone, sitting in for Patriot freedom fighter Alex Jones. I've just realized that on the InfoWars store site that Z-Shield, the toxic metal and chemical defense support system, is actually 25% off. Now, the sad truth, folks, is that our food, our water, our air is slowly poisoning us. There are tons of toxic chemicals we're absorbing every day. This is based on the fact that even the EPA admits that there's 800 million pounds of poison, pesticide, being dumped into the United States. What do you do about it? Well, Z-Shield is the very best all-natural formula for immunity, strength, and to repel these antioxidant poisons. An incredible formula, and 25% off due to our Memorial Day special. Now, I must tell you, the stock will not last long at this price. So do yourself and the movement for freedom a favor by going to the InfoWars store now and getting this terrific product. My grandson Nicholas uses it among a myriad of other InfoWars products, and I should be in the good health that he's in. So going back now to our guest, Dr. Jerry Corsi. Dr. Corsi, I think that maybe what the president needs to do here is to turn the table on his critics, to direct Attorney General Sessions to convene a grand jury. that the grand jury should interview Mr. Hayden, Mr. Clapper, Mr. Brennan, Mr. Rogers, and of course, Susan Rice, perhaps even Valerie Jarrett. And depending on what the grand jury learns, perhaps it's time to summons Barack Obama himself. After all, a fair question you may remember is, what did the president know and when did he know it? It's time to take the gloves off. Do you think the American people would support such an approach by the president?
I think it's necessary, and I think it's the next thing coming. I have written some articles. I wrote 2 or 3 I'm going to write. I'll write the 3rd soon, of the counterintelligence measures that President Trump ought to take. Remember, this is a propaganda attack, that the Russians were in collusion with the Democrats. It does not make logical sense. There's no proof for it. So it's just a propaganda. It's a lie the Democrats are trying to make true by repeating and repeating and repeating it. First thing you do, I said, was change the subject. Well, President Trump's done that with his European trip and his trip to the Middle East and to Europe. Second thing I said is silence the mainstream media. And I'm recommending moving the mainstream media out of the White House so that it no longer has that little tiny briefing room, which is really a disgrace, by the way. It's dirty, it's small, it's crummy, and it's maintained as a fiefdom by the mainstream media, who elbow everybody else aside. You can do just as well watching it on a live stream on television or on the internet. At any rate, that second one is just silence the mainstream media. Get them out of the building. Don't provide them access to information. Don't do daily briefings. Make it hard for them to get their information. Third, you attack back. And so you get the Attorney General. President Trump has all the apparatus right now of the intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice. He needs to fire massively people who were there under the Obama administration, because they're turning out all to be unloyal to undermining President Trump's administration. And then start some grand juries, start some investigations, dig deep into John Brennan's CIA, which I'm convinced was actually doing the hacking of the DNC, and then blaming it on the Russians, trying to set up, the footprints, the fingerprints that could trace to Russia, even though there's no proof it was Russia. And secondly, when you look at the hacks, take a look at the system. The 3 articles I've written, and we wanted to publish them all at one time, you're going to spend some time reading them. They're extremely detailed. I researched them and been researching them for a long time. So you're going to find out, for instance, why Seth Rich was hired and how he came up as a Democratic operative.
All right, Dr. Corsi, we are up against a hard break here, but right. There you have it. Old Washington hand, a man who knows where the bodies are buried. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Jerry Corsi.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome back to InfoWars. I'm sitting in for Alex Jones, and we are going to talk impeachment. Now, Congressman Al Green, a Democrat, says that he's pushing ahead with the process to draw up a bill of particulars for the impeachment of President Donald Trump. Frankly, I liked Mr. Green much better when he was just a singer. Oh, it's not the same guy. Pardon me. In any event, incredibly, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and by the way, Bill O'Reilly got this right. She does appear to have borrowed that hairdo from James Brown. The level of arrogance and misinformation and misstatements and non-facts who flow from this woman's mouth is really extraordinary. She's a hater, the worst kind of hater. And she pays no attention to the fact that her own Senator, Dianne Feinstein, and John Brennan, the Wahhabist who somehow managed to serve as CIA director for 2 presidents, both were forced to admit no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion. No crime, no collusion, no cover-up, as my friend Sam Nunberg, the Trump advisor, says. And we are really, it blows my mind to see what Maxine Waters is saying and doing. Let's take a quick look.
I just want to talk about your representation in Washington regarding our president as well.
I can't stand him.
I understand.
He's the most
that
horrible
too.
man I've ever seen in my life.
I love my president very much.
I'm glad you do.
Your position, my position as well.
I'm glad
but I also want to know why you weren't representing me in Washington by opposing the president.
Your president is a dishonorable, lying man. He mocked a journalist. I've never seen a grown man do that. He talked about grabbing women by the private parts. He lies every day. He's in bed with Putin and the Russians about oil, and everybody around him are allies with the Kremlin and with the oligarchs of Russia. They're going to take us down.
This is extraordinary. This woman is delusional.
Grabbing a woman's pussy, which I don't think he ever did.
He said it.
I go back to...
What grown man talks like that?
I go back to President Clinton.
I don't care about Clinton.
Well, of course
I care about this. Listen, I'm going to work every day until I get him impeached.
Yeah, no, she doesn't care about Clinton. Clinton, who raped and sexually assaulted dozens of people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You cannot impeach a woman of Congress.
Me in office.
All right, I think we got the flavor of this. This is demagoguery of the worst sort. And here's the real irony. Maxine Waters and her husband have engaged in business activities utilizing her position in public office that would have sent a Republican who was white to jail. And that is a fact from the stone cold truth. Perhaps it's time for the Justice Department to re-examine her business dealings before she lectures us about morality. And Congresswoman Waters, no proof that Donald Trump is in bed with the Russians. No proof whatsoever. Put up or shut up, as they say in the part of Connecticut that I'm from. We are also, I think, on the verge of a major White House shakeup in which the president could very well make personnel decisions that could save his presidency. Now, there has been some speculation in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, that David Urban, the hard-charging West Point graduate, distinguished Army veteran, and the man who helmed Donald Trump's incredible victory in Pennsylvania that put him over the top, a prize that eluded Mitt Romney, John McCain, and George W. Bush. Well, we're told that Mr. Urban might be in line for a major role in the Trump White House. In all honesty, David Urban served as the chief of staff for the toughest, meanest, smartest man who perhaps ever served in the United States Senate, Arlen Specter. Irascible, controversial, difficult, smart as can be. If you can manage the affairs of Arlen Specter, you can manage the affairs of President Donald J. Trump. David Urban is exactly a perfect representative of the new Trump Democrats. A former altar boy from Alquippa, Pennsylvania, whose father is a union card-carrying steelworker and a proud member of the NRA. David Urban is the kind of loyalist Donald Trump needs. I say this not just because he is a friend of mine, but because he's proven in the battle-tested war that we just went through in 2016 that he can deliver, that he can keep his mouth shut, that he can put his loyalty to the president first and foremost. And he knows how Washington works. And he has an extraordinary sense of ethics. He knows what can and cannot be done in Washington. I have no special knowledge of how and when and in what manner the president may tap David Urban's talents. I do know that he was seen dining with Ivanka Trump in Washington, D.C. only days ago. So I am hopeful that the Mr. President will do what is necessary to save himself. And here's a trivia question. What foreign country is Reince Priebus about to be appointed ambassador to? If you guessed Greece, well, I think you might be right. We are extraordinarily challenged at this point because the president is faced with adversaries who have no regard for facts or truth. In fact, the president himself, I think, really put this in perspective on the Sunday morning shows when he said that the leaks coming from his White House were fabricated lies. Notice how so many of our sources are anonymous. Well, that means that in many cases, take the Daily Beast, for example, they just don't exist. These elitist pukes who criticize our president kind of make it up as they go along. And you have the interlocking and totally coordinated effort to take highly sophisticated computer techniques, technological techniques by the tech left, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Yahoo, to promulgate their fake news and suppress the truth when it's on InfoWars or Breitbart or The Daily Caller or indeed Stone Cold Truth. This is the most important fight we face because, you see, the president cannot win, not on the economy, not on immigration, not on trade. He cannot make America great again without a vibrant, robust alternative media. The Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, they'd like to go back to the days when they had a total monopoly on political discourse in this country. You see, that back was broken in 2016, largely because of the technological advance that now has the majority of Americans getting their political news on a handheld device or an iPad or a PC. And in order to do so, they have to go through the internet. Well, when consumers, in this case voters, go through the internet to reach, shall we say, CNN, it doesn't take them long to figure out that there's better investigative reporting going on right here at InfoWars, and that they have a wealth of alternatives to find out what's really happening in America. Now, if you are going to help us fight the tech left, there is no better way that I can think of than going to the InfoWars.com store. I believe it's InfoWarsStore.com, actually, and taking a look at the new Emmerich's Essential line of organic household products would be a great place to start. For over 2 decades, I'm told that the listeners here at InfoWars have been asking for generic products to replace things like bug spray, sunscreen, and body wash with healthier, more efficient, more effective products. And the folks who run the labs for the InfoWars store have tested hundreds of different brands and have spoke to dozens of other manufacturers. But until now, they have not been able to produce a line of products that are up to the InfoWars standards, a line of products that you, the freedom fighters and liberty-minded folks who support us here at InfoWars, have been demanding from us for literally years. I'm talking about the non-nano SPF 30 zinc oxide sunscreen. This is what you need at the beach. I'm talking about the DEET free herbal bug spray. No poisons, no toxins, nothing in there that will kill you. The concentrated peppermint mouthwash. This reminds me very much of the fluoride-free toothpaste that my family has become addicted to, better than anything you can find in a drugstore. We're talking about the pure, unscented body wash. This stuff is great in a hot shower. The pure tea tree shampoo, all natural. the long-lasting natural deodorant that doesn't contain the poisoning aluminum, and so many more great household products available right now at the InfoWarsStore.com. So you can have a total win-win situation. You can you can support our fight for freedom, our fight for free expression, by going to the store and loading up on the products that the folks here at InfoWars have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars testing to assure they're bringing you the very best product at the very best price. Sure, you can go to Rite Aid or Walgreens or CVS. You'll pay more and you'll get inferior products that don't support the fight for freedom. So please, folks, go to the InfoWars.com store and help us in this struggle for free expression and the First Amendment. We are also going to talk about this personnel shakeup, as I indicated, is a unique opportunity for the president to get on offense. Now, there's a report that Steve Bannon, who is a nationalist, whose political views are probably somewhat copacetic with my own, certainly one who understands the game plan of the globalists. And the report is that Mr. Bannon will run a war room operation to help put the Trump administration on an offensive footing. Well, while this is a quaint idea, I'm not sure a war room is the real answer. The real answer, in my opinion, is for the president to double down on the agenda he put forward for the American people. Trump needs to deliver on policy, and he is. Little attention being given to the regulatory unraveling going on at EPA, for example, and other departments where the thicket of red tape, which is destroying job creation in this country, is being hacked back by Trump appointees. No, the president doesn't get any credit for that. Or an economy that has clearly turned the corner from the Obama doldrums. Revitalizing our economic vitality is a key. The president needs to go to the mat for a cut in the corporate income tax rate, cutting the rate below China, Mexico, Japan. This is the solution the president laid out in the campaign, and this is the solution that can revitalize our economy and give the president both time and resources to address the key questions we face regarding crime, trade, immigration, and so many other pressing issues. While the travel ban is something I entirely support, I think the economic keystone to Trump's success is in the dynamic, pro-growth campaign promises he put forward that need to be embodied in his thrust on Capitol Hill. Now, many people ask me, well, what about these establishment Republicans? They seem to have their own ideas regarding tax reform and tax reduction, largely the status quo. I actually saw one Republican congressman crowing about the fact that nothing would change. Well, that will not satisfy President Donald Trump, a man I've known for 40 years. You can get my book, The Making of the President 2016, How Donald Trump Orchestrated an American Revolution, at the InfoWars store. This is the insider's perspective on how Donald Trump pulled off the greatest political upset in American history. And it shows you the grit and the gumption and the determination of Donald J. Trump. Folks, he's a fighter. And these efforts to say he's disillusioned, he's frustrated, he's ready to throw in the towel, well, That's the fake news. Those are the fake sources the president was referring to on the Sunday morning shows. The president came back from Europe, exhilarated, excited, energized, and ready to do battle with the inside the Beltway forces arrayed against him. The mainstream media, their allies in the Democratic Party, and those in the deep state, the CIA and the other vaunted 17 intelligence agencies, all continue to be led by Barack Obama appointees. Mr. President, it's time to clean house. But this I know. Those here at InfoWars, our listeners, our viewers, our supporters, we, Mr. President, have your back. We will fight to make America great again. I'm Roger Stone. You're at InfoWars, and I will be right back.
All of us are students and have homework and projects and things due. Have you sent an email out to our faculty letting them know? No. What's been done about that? Because we're all here on our own time.
Yeah. I'm cake, girl. That is the first thing I'll do. I have not done it yet.
So they need to be told that these assignments won't be done on time. And we don't need to be penalized for that.
I don't know the names of all the students here.
We'll just send it to all the faculty. It doesn't matter. Your last president was black, so I know you can do it, Joe. Yeah, Joe.
I love your confidence in it. Hold on. Sorry. I speak with my hands.
The faculty need to know what's going on so that y'all can't keep doing this pointing fingers. And since I know
you act like we don't have technology, y'all. Are you listening? Okay, this is how you can help.
Please.
You please, George. You please. Come on.
Okay, we trying to listen. Go ahead.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Just go ahead and say it.
I want to go to work on these with Wendy, the other people here, the faculty.
Oh, faculty, y'all staying?
I need some privacy, folks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have claustrophobia.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
and we endure hate crimes on your campus that we pay to be here for.
That students of color have to work in threatening environments every day.
Come on, baby.
Welcome. Get to work.
You can get to work. We need this desk. Can you get this desk? I mean,
yeah, George, you're going to have migrate to your desk. We'll be right here.
All right, George, I'm going to catch you on the flip side, Playboy. Sorry, folks. I will work on these. You hold me accountable by Friday.
George, this is we got to do it every day. If you don't go to your desk, you don't let us.
So by Friday, if all those are met, you need to pay for a potluck.
I pay for a potluck anyway.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We want gumbo.
We want gumbo. Made by my mama.
Okay. Electronic copy of this to put it up on the college's website.
You can scan it.
I'm going to scan this, and we're going to put it up on the college's website, okay?
Oh, we got to tell him management skills. They got scanners down in the library.
Yeah. Let's get out of here. Peace out, y'all. I'm tired now. My legs hurt. My body hurt. I'm tired.